loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
It's time for another conversation. Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Dealridge. It's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Now, I'm going to be talking with Tom Corner. He's a father, husband, brother, son. And one of the things he said just now is he's trying to figure out the journey we're on in this life. Welcome, Tom.
Noreen, thank you so much. I love your intro song. It brightens everyone's day, so it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we're going to be talking about how can one become aware that he or she is on a path of self-destruction. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit more about Tom and why is it that these topics you feel comfortable enough sharing?
I've written a number of books. And I started out writing children's books because I have three awesome, wonderful daughters who I consider my greatest teachers. And I wanted to just trying to figure out, like I said, my path in life and to make sense of it. And I carried a lot of anger through my childhood. And I spent a lot of time over the years, 20 years, pretty much my lifetime, listening to a lot of people that are what I'll say my mentors. There's a gentleman by the name of Zig Ziglar who was a business mentor, and he canned something called Automobile University. So when I would travel a lot, I would listen to people like Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, or Dr. Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, and I wanted to figure out why I carried so much anger. And on this path towards happiness, understanding what everything means, I started writing children's books because I was figuring out, okay, the way through self-destruction, physically or mentally, there is a way out, and I wanted to share it. And I wanted to share it, and I wanted it to be something that, hey, if I can figure it out, I'll share it with my kids so they don't have to go through the struggles that I did, and share it with anybody else. So I started writing children's books, talking about goal setting, visualization, affirmations, and then my last book was my personal memoir about, it's entitled Borrowed Eyes and Feet, Finding Enlightenment After Rage. And it's about my journey and understanding why, as a grown adult, I reacted and responded in different ways to different situations and people. And I believed it was a matter of we all become who we are from what we learn from our upbringing.
True. And
sometimes we may not even be aware that we maybe are on a path of self-destruction, which is one of the topics that that you mentioned.
Okay, which is a nice segue then, is how can one then become aware that he or she's on a path of self-destruction?
Yes, so I always say it's something that takes place gradually, and then suddenly we live in a world where people suddenly want things to change and be instantaneous, and that's not the reality. It takes place gradually over time. But suddenly you might see someone like me who's talking with you on your podcast that, wow, how do you do that? It took a long time. And it is a matter of really, you have to awaken to what your path is. If it's self-destruction, some people may not even see it that way, Noreen. There are people who are addicts or alcoholics or are abusive, and they have no idea. And the question is, well, why? And it is typically, because if they're surrounded by people that are doing the same thing, they probably think that's normal. So to become aware of that is challenging, because if people that you're surrounding yourself with are doing the same thing, you may not know that you are on that path of self-destruction. So it's a matter of being brave enough, maybe, or strong enough, or willing to look another way. And really, at the end of the day, Noreen, I believe what keeps us here, and this is what you're doing, and why I write, is love. Love is what I believe keeps us looking towards finding that light or that happiness. And love is what keeps us in harmony as humans. And if we are able to grasp onto that and then surround ourselves with people that really support that, like all these mentors that I never met, I just listened to them, but they talked about love. They talked about awareness and self-acceptance and thriving. But it took me a long time to read, because I didn't believe it, because my perspective was different. My perspective was, well, this is the way I am, this is who I am, and this is my identity. And most people have a hard time realizing that, okay, you can actually change. But so it's that awareness, just those days where you want that happiness, and try to surround yourself, whether it's a podcast like yours, or listen to somebody, or read books that talk about something other than self-destruction, or what that person's used to.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
For all your events, such as educational forums, workshops, book launches, weddings, and more, contact Noreen Daly, the ultimate MC and event host. Visit noreendaly.com or follow her on Instagram at Noreen Daly Jam. Noreen Daly, creating long-lasting memories.
I'm listening, and based on what you're saying, though, is it so easy? And let me use the word easy. Is it so easy sometimes for somebody to then become so conscious that they recognize, okay, I need to change my environment. I probably need to change the things I'm watching, the things I'm listening to. Do you think in some way this is connected to age? That at a certain age or stage in your life, this happens. Talk to me a little bit about that, or is it just something that just happens over time?
Yeah, that's a good question to ponder. I believe everybody's different, and we all have our separate paths in our life journey. Some people awaken to it and they never have these struggles or these self-destructive behaviors, and that's the path that they live. So for some people, that's just the way it is. It is different for everybody, and I believe that's a part of our journey in this life. Is okay, we want to make sense of it. We want to figure out what happiness is, or find heaven on earth. And at the end of the day, Noreen, it is very easy, but the only reason it doesn't come easy to us is because of our belief system, our perspective, and if that's our identity, and we don't know of any other way, we make it difficult for ourselves. And that's again going back to, okay, well, how am I brought up? Who am I surrounded with? And it's understanding. In my book, Noreen, I talk about why I carried a lot of anger, and I couldn't find that happiness, and I went down a self-destructive path. I mean, I cut myself, and I talk about in my book the almost 100 scars on my body and cigarette burns on my body from self-destruction and cutting myself, and that was my identity. But I had these people Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson, a lot of these leaders that led with love, and they helped me change my perspective. So it's also, I believe, a spiritual thing. People need to have belief in something spiritual, and you call it whatever you want. You could call it soul, spirit, God, source energy, prana, chi. You could call it whatever you want, but you have to have a belief. I call it love. At the end of the day, it's love. And so I immersed myself in a book called A Course in Miracles. And there's a line in A Course in Miracles that says, pain is a wrong perspective. And it's a simple statement, but it's true. If my perspective is that of suffering and self-destruction, then that's all I know, and that's the way my life will be unless I'm able to change my perspective. And that's an easy statement, but we have to break away our ego, and our ego gives us this identity that we need to believe our identity is in this self-destructive behavior. And so it's really, it's a matter of, and here's the other thing. I did not do this myself. I have these mentors that I've listened to, but I've worked with a life coach for several years who would hold the focus for me. She would listen to me, Noreen, but she wasn't there to judge me or label me. She just was holding the focus and trying to get me to break those patterns and that perspective of self-destruction. So it's a matter of, and especially with men believe they have to do things their own, and if they have to prove themselves, I'm going to do everything on my own. And really, in a way, that's sort of a lie. You can, but the only way we succeed or survive anyway is with other people. And it's just that willingness to say, okay, I do need someone to help me to change that perspective for me, which is very important.
Okay. So you spoke of a life coach just now. And I know that some life coaches, they don't do this for free. So for somebody who's listening and saying, but it's easy for you to say, Tom, because you're able to afford a life coach, what would be your response to somebody saying, I'm not able to do that? What then?
That's a great point, because I did have to pay for it. So it is a matter. You can find people that could maybe even do better than a life coach who gets paid for what they're doing, because I speak with friends and acquaintances just from conversations or doing podcast interviews where they're like, hey, I'm stuck. And I've learned that I'll listen to them and try to hear them. And I'm not like my coach does. I'm just listening for a disconnect or picking up on their energy. So there are ways, if you're surrounding yourself with the right people, those people that support love and harmony, you'll get that for free. That's free, because you can be around people who will share it all the time. Like you and me connecting. I'm giving information that really I could say, hey, well, this is $100 an hour, but where if you don't have it, and for the longest time, I didn't have a life coach. But I paid for a book. I paid for books that I read or audio books, which so that's might cost $5 or $10, and you find the right book, and you read it, and then read it again, and eventually different books will show up in your life, and it's not free, but it's pretty close to it. But if you're stuck, that's where you do need somebody who's a mentor or a guide, and they don't have to be somebody who's doing this to make a living. And again, it goes back to answer your question. You could very easily find somebody that does this and holds the focus for you if you change the people you're around. Because if you surround yourself with people that are like that all the time, then that's readily available to you.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Does your business lack branding? Having difficulty realizing your vision? Look no further. Splinth Brand Design Consultancy specializes in developing personal and business brands. Services include strategic management, website creation, social media branding, and more. Visit them online at www.wearesplinth.com. Splinth, the brand you need to succeed.
So we've spoken about how somebody can become aware they're on a path, but can any positives be derived from somebody on a path of self-destruction, or from the whole idea of self-destruction?
Well, yes, absolutely. And it's, so you use self-destruction and you use positives, and that's oil and water. They don't go together, right?
Okay.
And it's just like, okay, people look at failure and success. They don't necessarily go together. But without one, you can't have the other. Because if you look at, again, human existence, we live in a dual reality. There's self-destruction and there's positive. There's love and there's hate. And if you go down a path of self-destruction, there's always positives that can be gleaned from it. But you have to be able to see it, right? So I was going down a self-destructive path when I was in my teens and early 20s, and I was again cutting and burning with cigarettes, and physically I was self-destructing, and mentally I was. And it was really me realizing that, okay, that was just kind of a quick fix or reaction for me to feel alive, but it never solved anything. So after years of doing that, it does nothing for me. It does absolutely nothing for me other than make me feel worse and carry a bigger burden, until I got to a point, Noreen, where I said, and I opened my book up talking about this, I have to end my life of suffering. And there's only two ways I can end my life of suffering. I could leave it physically by dying or suicide, or I could try to be brave enough to turn around and face my fears and ask them, whenever these fears come up, what's the worst that can happen? Is it really true? Because it's all in our head. Our self-destruction is a mindset, and it's not, none of it's true. But it took me years to figure that out. So with every bit of destruction or failure, that's, to me, that's a learning opportunity in disguise. If I fail, well, I need to ask why I'm failing, and how could I succeed. If I'm on a path of self-destruction, it feels normal to me, and some people may not wake up from that, because again, that's their path, that's who they're surrounded with, and that's their identity. But if they wake up and say, well, this doesn't feel good, I need to find another way. What can I learn from this? Why am I going down this path? Because most people don't realize it, and Wayne Dyer talked about this, that you could meet somebody, Noreen, and you could talk to them, and then all of a sudden you could say something that might trigger their self-destructive thoughts, and then they, as he said, they haul out their wounds, and they say, well, don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I've been through and how difficult it is? And so they just haul out these wounds that are in their mind and are not real, and that's making an excuse for getting better. But if you can realize that you're doing that, that's your awareness. That's where you can start to focus on taking positives out of this and looking at the positives on it. And it can happen, and I'm proof of it. But I'm telling people that it's not going to happen where you're just going to wake up tomorrow and you're better. You have to realize that I call it subscribing to the gradual part of it, because eventually you'll graduate to the sudden, and suddenly you'll be a different person. But you have to be aware that you will still catch yourself hauling out those wounds of the past, of your self-destructive past. But as long as you're aware, you can just go through a process of saying, okay, I brought up this self-destructive thought that led to a behavior, and say, okay, is it really true? Is it really true? Because it's not. Well, then if you go down the path, which I've done plenty of times, Noreen, what's the worst that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is not that I'm ridiculed, not that I'm embarrassed, not that I lose friends or lose family members. The worst thing that could happen is I die. And if I die, the question is, what happens to all my self-destructive thoughts and behaviors? They don't exist. So it's not like someone passes away and there's a bag of all these self-destructive thoughts and behaviors that somebody else picked up and carries with them. You can't put them in a bag. You can't put them in a bucket. So you realize that that's just your thought process. And if you go through that and challenge it and say, is it really true? And what's the worst that can happen? And you realize, wow, the worst that could happen is I'm no longer here and I'm free of my suffering. Well, why wouldn't I just actually learn to live and free myself of my suffering now, so that I can learn how to grasp onto those glimmers of happiness? And it's amazing and it's wonderful, but people have to realize it takes time, but it absolutely can be done.
It's an excellent note to end on, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
Yeah. This was Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.